Have you ever wondered why some people walk into a new season of life with confidence while others feel stuck, afraid to take the next step? What if the difference is not their strength, not their resources, not their opportunities, but a single revelation hidden inside Psalm 27? When you read the words, "The Lord is my light and my salvation," something begins to shift. It is as if the darkness surrounding your decisions, your relationships, your inner battles starts losing its power. Psalm 27 is not just poetry. It is a spiritual key, a doorway, a declaration that breaks fear at its root and opens a new chapter in your life. And maybe you have felt lately that something is changing inside you, a quiet stirring, a sense that God is preparing you for something you cannot fully see yet. That's not imagination, that's alignment. There comes a moment when God stops letting you walk by sight and begins teaching you to walk by revelation. Psalm 27 speaks directly into that moment. It exposes the fears that whisper you are not ready, not strong enough, not worthy enough. It silences the voices that predict failure before you even begin. It confronts the invisible battles no one knows you are fighting and reminds you that divine protection goes before you, covers you, and surrounds your next step. When David wrote this psalm, he was not living in comfort. He was surrounded by threats, uncertainty, betrayal. Yet his first words were not, "Lord, help me." They were, "The Lord is my light." That is why this psalm opens new chapters. It shifts your focus from what is happening around you to what God is doing within you. And once that shift begins, nothing remains the same. Maybe you have been sensing a transition, a door you cannot yet see but can feel in your spirit. Psalm 27 is the voice that says you are not walking alone. It is the reminder that courage is born not in the absence of fear, but in the presence of God. And when that presence becomes your foundation, the chapter ahead stops looking intimidating and starts looking inevitable. You begin to understand that every delay, every confusion, every silent night was preparing your heart for direction that only God could give. And as this truth settles in, something in you stands taller, breathes deeper, believes again. If you have ever felt that Psalm 27 was calling your name, it is because it was preparing you for exactly this moment, this shift, this beginning. And if this awakens something in you, if it resonates with your own battles and desires, feel free to share it in the comments, because your perspective may strengthen someone else who is in the same place. Also, remember to like this video and check if you are already subscribed, as this journey we are stepping into together is just beginning, and what comes next might speak to you even more deeply as we continue unfolding the power of this psalm. When you look closely at Psalm 27, you begin to notice something profound happening beneath the surface. It is not only a declaration of faith, it is a shift of perspective that stabilizes the heart in moments when everything around you feels uncertain. Many people think fear is the greatest enemy of spiritual progress, but fear itself is often just a symptom. The deeper enemy is the internal instability that fear creates, the way it clouds your judgment, weakens your confidence, and convinces you that your future is fragile. Psalm 27 confronts this instability by anchoring you in the presence of God, not as a distant idea, but as a present reality shaping your steps. When David says, "Whom shall I fear?" he is not pretending that danger does not exist. He is redefining where his strength comes from. There are seasons of life when the attacks you face are not visible, when the real battles unfold in your thoughts, your emotions, your spirit. These are the moments when doubt creeps in quietly, when memories of past failures try to pull you backward, when insecurities whisper that you are not capable of entering the chapter God is calling you into. Psalm 27 steps into that internal conflict like a steady voice, reminding you that the presence of God is not merely comforting, it is stabilizing. It grounds you when your emotions fluctuate. It strengthens you when your fears multiply. It creates a fortress around your mind so that the chaos outside does not become chaos within. And once your inner world is stabilized, your outer world begins to reflect that strength. You may not realize it, but much of the spiritual opposition you experience comes right before moments of breakthrough. The enemy does not fight what is not moving. He fights what is shifting, what is rising, what is being positioned for something greater. That is why, just before a new chapter unfolds, confusion often intensifies. Old wounds resurface. Unexpected challenges emerge. It is not coincidence. It is resistance. Psalm 27 speaks directly into that resistance by declaring that even if an army rises against you, your heart does not have to collapse under pressure. Your peace is not dependent on circumstances, but on the God who surrounds those circumstances. That is how spiritual stability is built. Not by removing battles, but by reclaiming your identity in the middle of them. And perhaps you have been navigating a season where everything feels heavier than usual, where the pressure seems to increase without explanation, where you feel stretched emotionally and spiritually. Instead of interpreting this as a sign that something is wrong, Psalm 27 invites you to see it as confirmation that God is strengthening you for what comes next. You are not being weakened, you are being fortified. You are not being overwhelmed, you are being prepared. You are learning to stand with a confidence that does not depend on external reassurance, but on divine stability. And once that stability settles into your spirit, it becomes nearly impossible for fear to uproot what God has planted, creating a foundation that quietly pushes you forward into the unfolding chapter ahead. When David proclaims, "The Lord is my light and my salvation," he is not merely speaking poetry, he is redefining the core of his identity. Most people walk through life shaped by past failures, by the opinions of others, or by fears they never fully acknowledge. But Psalm 27 offers a different kind of foundation, one that does not shift with emotion or circumstances. When God becomes your light, you stop navigating your future through the lens of past disappointment. When he becomes your salvation, you stop measuring your worth through human approval. And when he becomes your fortress, your identity rises from a place that cannot be shaken by anything that happens around you. This is why the psalm carries such transformative power. It does not just comfort, it redefines. There are moments in life when you feel as though you are standing between two realities, the person you used to be and the person God is shaping you to become. In that space of transition, identity becomes vulnerable. Doubt begins to challenge your confidence. You start questioning whether you are really prepared for the next chapter God is opening. This is exactly where the words of Psalm 27 become a shield. They do not simply inspire, they instruct your spirit to remember who you are because of who God is. When you declare that the Lord is your light, you are rejecting the darkness of insecurity. When you proclaim him as salvation, you silence the voice that insists you must earn your worth. And when you affirm him as your stronghold, you declare that nothing has the authority to destabilize your calling. Identity in God is not built in moments of comfort, it is forged in seasons of pressure. David did not write this psalm from a peaceful place. He wrote it while navigating betrayal, threats, and uncertainty. Yet instead of allowing circumstances to define him, he anchored himself in the character of God. That is the secret this psalm teaches you. Confidence does not come from knowing the future, it comes from knowing the one who stands in your future. And as that realization deepens, something inside you shifts. You stop viewing challenges as signs that you are unprepared and begin seeing them as confirmation that you are evolving into someone stronger, someone more aligned with God's purpose, someone capable of carrying what comes next. Perhaps you have been feeling the tension of transformation, sensing that God is calling you to rise, to step into a chapter that demands a stronger version of yourself. Psalm 27 reminds you that your identity is not fragile, not temporary, not defined by the worst moments you have lived through. It is rooted in a God who does not change, who does not reconsider his plans, who surrounds your life with purpose even when you cannot see it clearly. And as this truth settles into your spirit, you begin to understand that your identity in God is not something you chase, it is something you awaken to. It unfolds quietly, steadily, preparing you to walk with a confidence that does not depend on circumstance, but on divine certainty, drawing you further into the new chapter already forming ahead. There are seasons when the real battle in your life is not what people can see, but what silently unfolds inside your spirit. This is where Psalm 27 becomes more than scripture. It becomes strategy. David speaks of enemies rising against him, but many of the enemies you face do not carry visible weapons. They come as confusion, as discouragement, as a heaviness that settles over your thoughts without warning. They come as sudden waves of doubt or unexpected emotional pressure that tries to cloud your direction and slow your momentum. These inner battles are often the very places where the enemy attempts to interfere with the chapter God is preparing to open. And just like David, you may find yourself asking why resistance increases right when clarity begins to form. Psalm 27 reveals something powerful. Spiritual resistance is often a sign of spiritual positioning. When David says that even if an army surrounds him, his heart will not fear, he is teaching you that the attack is not evidence of abandonment, but evidence of alignment. Pressure intensifies because purpose is drawing near. Confusion rises because clarity is approaching. The enemy does not waste energy on what is stagnant. He targets what is shifting into divine territory. And the more your spirit begins to align with what God is preparing, the more the enemy attempts to create noise, distraction, and emotional turbulence to pull you off course. This is why understanding the spiritual dimension of your battles is essential. Some of the heaviness you have been feeling is not random. It is warfare. Not the explosive kind that announces itself loudly, but the silent kind that slowly tries to drain your confidence and weaken your perspective. Psalm 27 confronts this subtle warfare by turning your focus back to the presence of God as your stabilizing force. David understood that the closer he moved toward his calling, the more opposition appeared, not to stop him, but to test what he truly believed. And the same is true for you. Your spiritual clarity becomes sharper when you recognize that every moment of resistance is also an opportunity to reinforce your trust in God's guidance. The battle is not a sign that you are off track. It is often confirmation that you are moving in the right direction. So when your thoughts become noisy, when emotions fluctuate, or when unexpected resistance rises, Psalm 27 teaches you to look beyond the surface and perceive what is happening spiritually. You are not just fighting to survive, you are fighting to advance. Something in your life is being aligned, strengthened, and prepared for the next phase God is opening. And this awareness becomes a shield, not removing the battle, but empowering you to walk through it with a steady heart, knowing that God is not only present, but actively leading you through the very resistance that once intimidated you, guiding you toward the chapter forming just ahead. If anything in this message resonates with what you have been feeling internally, share your experience in the comments. Your words may help someone else walking through the same silent battle. One of the most misunderstood principles in The journey of faith is the command to wait. Most people interpret waiting as inactivity, silence, or delay, but Psalm 27 reveals something much deeper. When David declares, "Wait on the Lord," he is not describing a passive posture. He is describing a spiritual alignment. Waiting is not sitting still. Waiting is positioning your heart so God can open the right chapter at the right time. It is the quiet space where your spirit is strengthened, your perspective is refined, and your desires are tested to see which ones are rooted in faith and which ones are fueled by fear. And while waiting can feel slow, it is actually one of the most accelerated seasons of spiritual growth. The truth is that some chapters of your life remain closed, not because God is withholding something, but because your heart is still being shaped to hold what comes next. Waiting exposes impatience, refines motives, and reveals whether you want God's will or just relief from discomfort. Many rush ahead, opening doors that were never meant for them, stepping into relationships, decisions, or opportunities that look promising but lack divine timing. Psalm 27 protects you from that. It teaches you that the strength you gain while waiting is often more important than the thing you are waiting for. David did not pray for God to speed up the process. He prayed for courage to endure it. That tells you that waiting is not a delay of destiny, it is preparation for destiny. There is a reason the enemy tries to attack you most when you are in a season of waiting. He knows that impatience can sabotage what faith has been preparing. He knows that discouragement can blind you to the movement of God happening behind the scenes. Waiting feels difficult because it exposes everything inside you that resists surrender. Yet this is where Psalm 27 becomes transformative. It reframes waiting not as wasted time, but as sacred time. Time where God strengthens your heart, sharpens your discernment, and aligns your spirit with His voice so that when the next chapter opens, you do not walk into it confused or unprepared, but steady, confident, and grounded in Him. Perhaps you have been in a season that feels slow, where answers are not coming quickly, where opportunities seem delayed, where clarity is unfolding gently instead of suddenly. Psalm 27 invites you to see this season not as a setback, but as a divine pause designed to strengthen you internally before God moves externally. Waiting creates the inner stability needed for the blessings you have prayed for. It forms the resilience required to carry what God will entrust to you. And as your heart grows stronger in the waiting, something quietly begins to shift within you, positioning you for the moment when God finally opens the next chapter, a moment that will make sense of every silent season that came before. One of the most powerful truths hidden within Psalm 27 is the emphasis on seeking the presence of God above everything else. David does not ask first for victory, protection, or answers. He asks for presence. One thing I ask of the Lord, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. This reveals something essential about spiritual transformation. The new chapter God wants to open in your life is not built on external changes, but on internal alignment. Before God shifts circumstances, He shifts the heart. Before He opens doors, He strengthens the foundation. And the presence of God becomes a place where that foundation is formed. Many people believe breakthrough comes from striving, planning, or pushing forward. But Psalm 27 shows that breakthrough begins with seeking. When you intentionally draw closer to God, something in your spirit begins to clear. Old fears loosen their grip, confusion starts to fade, desires begin to realign with purpose. The presence of God does not simply comfort you, it recalibrates you. It reveals the places within you that need healing, the wounds you have ignored, the patterns that have quietly shaped your decisions, and the doubts that have limited your confidence. And as these deeper layers are brought into the light, Your inner world begins to shift in ways that prepare you for what God is about to release. This is why seeking God is not optional for someone stepping into a new chapter. It is essential. The presence of God renews the mind, restores vision, and strengthens the spirit. It gives you clarity that logic alone cannot produce. It opens your eyes to opportunities you would have overlooked and shields you from distractions that would have derailed your progress. Many of the battles you face are won long before circumstances change, simply because your heart has been anchored in a place of peace and spiritual clarity. David understood that the presence of God was not just a refuge, it was the strategy through which he navigated uncertainty with confidence. And perhaps this is exactly where you find yourself now. You sense that God is preparing something ahead, but the details are still hidden. You feel movement in your spirit, but the path is not yet clear. This is the moment when seeking God becomes your greatest advantage. In His presence, strength returns. In His presence, direction unfolds. In His presence, the noise of fear grows quiet, and the voice of purpose becomes unmistakably clear. As this inner strengthening takes place, your spirit becomes aligned with the chapter God is preparing to open, allowing you to move with a steady confidence that does not depend on circumstances, but on the one who guides you through them, shaping every step that is still to come. There comes a point in every spiritual journey when two voices rise inside you, competing for your attention, the voice of fear and the voice of faith. Psalm 27 exposes this inner conflict with remarkable clarity. Fear whispers scenarios that have not happened, magnifies what could go wrong, and builds emotional walls around possibilities God is trying to open. Faith, on the other hand, calls you forward, urging you to step into alignment with what God has already spoken over your life. Both voices speak to the same heart, but only one can guide your decisions. And the tension between these two forces often intensifies right before God shifts you into a new chapter. Fear is powerful not because it tells the truth, but because it tells a story. It creates narratives about rejection, failure, loss, or disappointment, narratives so vivid they feel real. These stories try to convince you that playing small is safer than stepping into what God is calling you to do. Yet the voice of faith tells another story entirely. It pulls you forward, reminding you of God's presence, His protection, His promises. Faith does not ignore danger or uncertainty. It simply refuses to let them define your direction. This is why David could say, "My heart will not fear," even while surrounded by uncertainty. He had learned to recognize which voice deserved authority in his life. The inner conflict you feel is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of transition. When God brings you to the edge of a new chapter, fear will always attempt to rise because it senses the shift. But Psalm 27 teaches you that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear lead. Every step of obedience invites faith to grow stronger. Every moment of surrender silences the narratives that once held you back. Your spirit begins to recognize the difference between the voice that confines you and the voice that calls you. And slowly, the balance shifts. Faith becomes clearer, fear becomes quieter. The heart begins to follow the voice that carries truth, purpose, and divine direction. Perhaps this is the tension you have been feeling lately. A part of you is ready to rise, ready to move, ready to trust, yet another part hesitates, questioning whether you are capable or prepared. Psalm 27 reminds you that you are not meant to navigate this transition alone. The voice of faith does not come from your own strength. It comes from the presence of God walking with you. As faith grows louder in your spirit, new clarity begins to form, guiding you toward the place God has already prepared. You start to sense that this internal shift is not the end of a struggle, but the beginning of a breakthrough. a quiet confirmation that the chapter ahead is closer than you imagined. If this inner battle between fear and faith resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience may speak powerfully into someone else's journey. As you move deeper into the message of Psalm 27, something remarkable begins to emerge. This psalm is not only a prayer, it is a declaration that reshapes the atmosphere around your life. When David speaks of seeking God's beauty and inquiring in his temple, he is doing more than expressing devotion. He is aligning himself with a prophetic reality. The words of Psalm 27 function almost like a spiritual key, unlocking clarity where confusion once lived, restoring hope where discouragement settled, and illuminating direction where uncertainty seemed overwhelming. There is a reason this psalm has survived centuries and still speaks with such force today. It carries the kind of truth that does not age, a truth that continues to realign hearts with the purpose of God. Many people look for signs of breakthrough in external circumstances, expecting sudden changes, open doors, or dramatic shifts. But Psalm 27 reveals that breakthrough often begins internally, long before anything visible happens. The moment David expresses confidence that he will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, he is not describing what he sees. He is describing what he believes. This kind of declaration is powerful because it shifts the spirit before it shifts the situation. It transforms the inner landscape, preparing your heart to perceive opportunities you might have overlooked and strengthening your courage to walk through doors you once feared. It is a reminder that spiritual alignment precedes spiritual advancement. When you allow the truth of Psalm 27 to shape your thoughts, a subtle transformation begins. Hope becomes steadier. Discernment becomes sharper. The sense of spiritual fog that once clouded your path begins to lift. You start to recognize that the goodness of God is not something distant or theoretical. It is something unfolding around you, even in moments that feel heavy or uncertain. This awareness changes how you interpret challenges. What once seemed like obstacles now look like transitions. What once felt like delays now reveal themselves as preparation. The psalm becomes a lens through which you see your life differently, with a clarity that refuses to be shaken by temporary circumstances. Perhaps you have been feeling a quiet shift inside you, something that whispers, "There is more ahead." That whisper is not imagination. It is alignment. It is the Spirit responding to divine truth. The more Psalm 27 settles into your heart, the more you begin to sense movement, even if the path is still forming. You feel your confidence returning, not because everything is certain, but because your spirit is awakening to a deeper assurance. You realize that God is not only guiding your steps, He is reshaping your vision, your expectations, your understanding of what is possible. And as this inner vision grows stronger, you find yourself standing at the threshold of a new chapter, one shaped not by fear or limitation, but by a renewed awareness of God's goodness unfolding in ways you are just beginning to perceive. As Psalm 27 continues to unfold, it becomes clear that this passage is not only about external protection, but about internal transformation. The deeper its words penetrate your spirit, the more you begin to notice a shift happening within you. Fear that once felt overwhelming begins to lose its grip. Doubt that once clouded your decisions starts to dissolve. There is a strengthening taking place beneath the surface, one that reshapes how you see yourself and how you interpret what you are walking through. David's confidence was not built on the absence of challenges, but on the presence of a God who stood with him in every moment of uncertainty. That same presence begins to transform you when you allow the truth of this psalm to settle deeply in your heart. Transformation does not always announce itself loudly. Often it begins quietly, like a soft realignment of your thoughts, a deeper calm in your emotions, a new clarity in your spirit. You start to notice that situations that once intimidated you no longer carry the same weight. The fears that used to overwhelm you now appear smaller in comparison to the strength rising within you. This is the power of divine assurance. It does not eliminate challenges, but it redefines how you stand in front of them. Psalm 27 shapes your inner posture, teaching you to walk with a confidence that does not depend on visible evidence, but on spiritual truth. It reminds you that you are not defined by past struggles, but by the presence of God leading you forward. This transformation also shifts your perspective on timing, purpose, and direction. Things that once felt frustrating or confusing begin to make sense as you see them through a renewed lens. You begin to understand why certain doors closed, why certain relationships changed, why certain seasons felt heavy. What once appeared as loss now looks like alignment. What once felt like delay now appears as preparation. Your spirit starts to recognize that God has been orchestrating every step, not to limit you, but to position you. This inner shift, though subtle, becomes the foundation that allows you to enter a new chapter without carrying the weight of old fears or unanswered questions. And perhaps this is where you are right now, experiencing a kind of internal awakening that you cannot fully explain but can clearly feel. You sense that your heart is stronger, your vision is clearer, your spirit is quieter in the best way. The transformation happening within you is not accidental, it is intentional. It is God preparing you to receive what He has been shaping in silence. And as this renewed strength grows, you begin to feel ready to step into the chapter that has been forming behind the scenes, ready to embrace what once intimidated you, ready to walk with a courage that comes not from your own ability, but from the assurance that God is guiding every step toward what is about to unfold. As you reach the final movements of Psalm 27, something profound becomes unmistakably clear. This psalm is not only guiding you through past fears or current uncertainties, it is preparing you for a decisive turning point. David's final declaration, "Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart," is more than encouragement. It is an announcement, a spiritual signal that the chapter ahead is not a distant hope, but an imminent reality. When this truth starts to resonate within you, your heart begins to shift. You no longer interpret silence as absence or delay as denial. Instead, you see these moments as the quiet shaping of God's timing, the refining of your readiness, the strengthening of your spirit for what is about to unfold. There are seasons when God works in ways you can clearly see, opening doors, redirecting your steps, aligning opportunities. But there are also seasons when His work is invisible, happening beneath the surface, preparing breakthroughs that will appear suddenly though they were built slowly. Psalm 27 reveals that both seasons are sacred. Both are part of the transformation that leads you into a new chapter. The courage you gain, the clarity you recover, the faith that grows inside you are not incidental. They are intentional preparations. And as this psalm settles deeper into your spirit, you begin to understand that the new chapter is not something you must force open. It is something you are being led into by a God who has already gone ahead of you. You may not fully see what is forming, but you can feel the shift. It is the quiet certainty that the struggles you endured are giving way to strength. It is the realization that the confusion you faced is turning into direction. It is the awareness that the waiting you endured has shaped you into someone capable of carrying what comes next. This is the essence of stepping into a new chapter with God, not rushing, not fearing, not hesitating, but moving with a confidence grounded in His presence, His timing, and His promise. The transformation within you is already signaling that the transition ahead is not only possible, but purposeful. And now, standing at this threshold, you can sense that what God is preparing is greater than what you are leaving behind. The assurance rising in your spirit is not accidental. It is confirmation that the new chapter is ready to unfold. And as you walk toward it, Psalm 27 becomes more than a passage. It becomes the foundation of your courage, the voice that steadies your heart, the truth that guides your next steps into what God has been orchestrating all along, shaping your life with a precision you are only beginning to recognize. If this journey through Psalm 27 has spoken to you, feel free to leave a comment saying something like, "This message was, for me," to mark this moment in your own spiritual walk. And if this message brought clarity or strength to your heart, a like on the video helps this content reach others who may need it just as deeply. If you have not yet subscribed, consider joining this space so you can continue receiving guidance for every step of your journey. And if you feel led to keep going, there is a video right here that expands this message even further, inviting you to continue walking into what God is preparing next.